All right, thanks, Ash. Hey, everyone, I'm Alec. I'm one of the media co-chairs from the Chicago Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. And just briefly wanted to give a little bit of an overview of the organization and what we do as the media committee. So as Ash had stated in the inclusivity statement, the Chicago Alliance is a Black-led and left-led organization. And we were founded as part of the National Alliance in 1973 for the movement to free Angela Davis and all political prisoners. The Chicago Alliance Against Racist Political Repression has defended the rights of oppressed people in Illinois and across the world. The Alliance has a lot of different campaigns and is dedicated to a lot of different work. Some of our campaigns include a campaign to stop police crimes, freeing incarcerated survivors of police torture, working within labor issues, immigration rights, and prisoner rights. Most recently, as some folks might have heard, we just passed the Empowering Communities for Public Safety Ordinance, which came out of over 12 years of struggle for community control of the police, with working towards our piece of legislation, CPAC, which brought us to the table of the powers that will be, and won a victory for the people for the most comprehensive and most powerful civilian accountability ordinance in the entire country in any large US city. So we're still not done with that work, and we're still fighting for a referendum to get even more community control. So we're continuing to work on that and are really dedicated to stopping police crimes within our communities, and also staying committed to a lot of the other issues that concern our organization. So within the Alliance, there's a lot of different committees also that make up the group. Here today, you're joining members from the Media Committee. So the Media Committee at the Alliance works on a whole lot of different stuff, ranging from social media graphics and stuff we're going to discuss tonight, to making posters and banners for protests, to live streaming forums and events, to recording video at actions and editing those together. So it's really broad, and we meet once a week to kind of go over a lot of our different tasks and what's happening in the organization and with allied organizations. And always kind of have space for everyone to grow into new roles and learn new things. So if anyone is interested after the Skillshare, when we're done, we're going to leave a little bit of information for how you can get involved with the Media Committee or with other committees and campaigns with the Alliance. So pass it back to Ash so we can dive in.
Thanks, Al. All right. So art in the resistance has really been, they've been a big part of, art has been a big tool in tandem to the resistance is what I'm trying to say. And someone who's done that really closely to the Black Liberation Movement is Emory Douglas. And I wanted to just give an example of, how powerful art can be in both like sharing the message of the people and also empowering communities for their, voices to be heard, but also, us as individuals learning these tools so we ourselves can, amplify the work as much as we can. As much as us are all online these days, I'm a huge fan of learning how to use digital tools like Canva to incorporate like hand-drawn things, hand-lettered, illustrations and things. I think Emory, you can see, has a little bit more of an illustrative quality. We won't get into exactly how to do all of those techniques, but I will show at the very end how you can take some more of your artistic drawings or hand lettering, whether it's posters or signs or banners, and bring them into the digital space for different social shares, whatever you're trying to make. So I wanted to give a shout out to Emory because he's a huge inspiration to me personally, as well as I would say a lot of the members of the media committee in CAARPR. All right, so jumping into some of the basics, the software that I'm currently in, this is called Canva. So if you've never used Canva before, it's a really wonderful tool that kind of emerged onto the market in the last few years that really makes design accessible in a way that it really hasn't been for a lot of people. I myself am a first generation college student, and I learned how to use all the fancy design softwares, but some of the issue with that, especially when doing movement work, is a lot of those softwares aren't accessible to everybody. They're pretty expensive, as well as they're, they take a little bit longer to learn. But Canva is really great because it kind of provides you with different templates for pretty much anything that you might be trying to create. Another thing that I really love about this platform in particular for movement work is its ability to share different designs and organize those designs with teammates and comrades. So you can really create templates, different designs for different things, and kind of save them to be utilized as templates for future things, to collaborate and get feedback from different collaborators. It's a great place to kind of store and archive a lot of the work that you're doing. And you'll see here too, there's a bunch of different buttons on kind of searching for what exactly you're going to be designing. So I always say, if you wake up in the morning and make choices, you are a designer. Anything that you do with intention is designing. So design is a very functional tool. We use design to kind of create and communicate. It could be processes, it could be actual tangible options. Its goal is to be functional and kind of exchanging information. So really, depending on what you're wanting to create will depend on the kind of template or format, sometimes called orientation, that you'll want to select to begin designing in. So for this Skillshare, we're going to be designing an Instagram post. So a lot of our kind of work in the digital space is to share about actions and different efforts that are connected to the movement work, and sharing those virtually. And those are all through social platforms. So we're going to be starting with the Instagram posts. But before I go into this exact template, I did want to show that you can actually use the search engine here to search any sort of kind of template or poster that you might have in mind. So you can see I've searched Instagram posts. I also wanted to just see, like, do they have anything that is suitable for actions or protests? And I actually have quite a few. So another great thing about Canva is you don't really need to have any sort of design background. A lot of these are pretty well put together as is. And you really just have to click it. And once the template opens up, you can see everything in this is editable. So you can change the picture, upload your own picture, your own text, your own type. And a lot of us know in movement work, things are always on the move. So sometimes it's helpful just to have something that's ready to go. You could just make some quick tweaks and get it out. All right, so I'm going to open up the Instagram format, and you'll see I kind of built out the presentation within this format. So I wouldn't recommend making this many pages normally, but for the case of this presentation, there's several pages. Okay, I'm gonna hide this. So starting with kind of the basics and how we're kind of communicating with language, there's always going to be a little bit of a hierarchy in the organization of language. So I always say that before you really get into the aesthetics or how you're really going to design it, you want to start thinking about, what is the most important priority of this design. So for this purpose, we're going to say this is going to be a movement graphic, and we're going to make a digital graphic to encourage people to join our live stream for the 2nd annual National Alliance Conference that is happening this weekend. So that is kind of our main purpose. And you can see here in Canva, there's a notes tab, which this is something new that I learned about. But you can see I kind of have different things in each slide. So a thing that you can utilize this space for is perhaps you don't know exactly what you want your design to look like, but you do have all the information. I know in a lot of the Alliance media community, a lot of times we're working together with different copywriters. And so a lot of times you'll get all of this info in an email, and kind of organizing it in a way where you can see it all and just start to piece together, what's the main focus, what is kind of the details, as well as some of the information here in the body copy. So these are kind of the technical terms to determine those hierarchies. We have the main header, which is the focus, the really main priority. The subheader, this might be kind of a secondary title. Perhaps it could be like the location or the date of the event. It's something that's kind of secondary to that main purpose, where the body copy, sometimes called the body text or just copy, this is really where you're going to want a legible font for sometimes more of that detailed information. So you usually see this in kind of a paragraph style font. So I did put a rule of thumb here for colors. This is by no means like a strict rule, but I find it to be a little bit more cohesive and organized when you choose 3 to 4 colors for a design, as well as even 2 to 3 fonts. Because what happens if we have too many different fonts going on, sometimes it can be confusing to the eye on like where you're going or what's kind of happening. So this can help us just tune in to create a little bit more of a cohesion between all the different working elements within a design. So you'll see here, I chose 4 different colors, and these are kind of representing 2 colors that the Alliance uses pretty often, the red and the green. They're a little bit muted from our kind of typical colors, getting a little playful with it, and then as well as black and white here. I outlined the white. Let's see what's next. All right. So with thumbnails, this is kind of just a fancy word for sketches. It's literally just, I do this sometimes when, maybe you have all those assets of the information and the things that you want on a graphic or a poster. And, I think sometimes we expect like the first thing to be the thing, like the design, but sometimes it's helpful to kind of like play with different thumbnails to work around those different elements. So you can kind of see, I just grabbed this off Google that, there's like a title, it looks like there's a little photo or illustration. There's likely some text that needs to be on this. But it's almost as if this person is using these thumbnails to get a sense of, okay, where can all of these things live? And I put in here that, I think sometimes boundaries can be limiting, but also like creating these boundaries for ourselves can actually be really playful and helping us try different things that maybe we wouldn't normally try. And you can also take this same approach with lettering. I know with like banners or protest signs, things that are really kind of typography heavy, so just text heavy, you can get really playful with how type is laid out. And this is by creating the grids or creating that kind of boundary for the text to live in that you can then draw in and kind of erase. So obviously, if you're going to get into this kind of text exploration, this is more for drawing, but it's a great way to kind of just think about how different things can fit in with your design. Okay. Is there any questions so far?
Will we be able to access these slides?
Sure. Yeah, I think, yeah, we could share it. Let me actually, we can share the file for this at the end.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, cool. So as I was mentioning before, we have kind of all of the info that we're going to put on this flyer. And the purpose I said for this flyer is going to be, it's going to live on social media. So we kind of choose the square because this can be utilized across all platforms, Facebook, Twitter. So this is kind of a go-to size when we do social media posts. And you can see here, I kind of tried to like, again, create those limitations and those boundaries for each text. You definitely don't have to do this at all. I just kind of wanted to give an example of, getting your brain to start thinking about that organization before jumping into the design. Okay, so getting grounded. So one of the important differences that I realized from Canva versus like softwares like Adobe is that it's a little bit more challenging to pinpoint individual layers. So in Canva, it's almost like you're working on a collage and you're just adding layers upon layers to things, which can get frustrating if you don't work from the ground up, right? So when you're approaching your design, you should try and start with what is going to be the base layer, what might be like any framing or things on the outside, things like logos that are going to be kind of static to the background. You're going to want to get those on the page first before you start layering all the text and the photos and any other design elements. And that will just be a little bit more helpful for you, I think, in the process. So you're not having to kind of backtrack. So something, again, that is kind of a personal preference. I love textures. So I usually, when I am starting with a background image, I like to put in something that is going to like actually ground the viewer like in real life, right? Like bringing in like that kind of sensory experience into the digital space. So it's very subtle, right? You don't want to get too, like you don't want it to be too much or too overwhelming. But you can see here, I actually have two images, or maybe you didn't realize that at first, but in Canva, we can go over to the upload tab, and you have the option here to upload any image off of your desktop, or if you go over into the background tab, you can type in, I think I typed in paper, and it was the very first one here. That was a free option. And when you click it, it just loads right into your frame here. So that's what I loaded in first. And then after that, I went back up to elements and I chose a box. So you'll see the box here is this kind of ivory looking color. And then from this point, there's just a very, very slight tweak in the transparency. So you can see a little bit of that texture behind it. So how I did that is, move around my things here. I went to this button here. So you can kind of see it almost looks like this transparency. It gets lighter to darker here. And when you click on this button, this little toggle pops up here. And what you can do is you could bring it way down to show more of what's behind it. You're making it, essentially you're taking away, you're taking away its visibility while you're adding more of its visibility as you go up. So I try and find a sweet spot where it's not totally opaque. There's a little bit of transparency there, so it's not too overwhelming. So that's a great kind of first step to kind of get your base going, get this kind of grounded feeling. Okay. So here I added really just, again, like optional elements, but I always like to kind of frame the photo a little bit, give it a little bit of boundaries to work with, as well as anything that is kind of going to be like a necessary static element. So I know for a lot of us, we're working within organizations, and most organizations will send you a PNG file of their logo. So what that means is a PNG is essentially, has a transparent background, So when you upload it, you're not going to get that kind of box around, that rectangular box around the logo, but the actual kind of transparent version. You can kind of see when I hover it, it's still that square version, but the corners are transparent. So if you are hoping to get some digital assets and collaborate with others, you can ask for a PNG file to make sure it's that transparent version. And then to add these borders here, this was back up in Elements. And then I went here to the lines and shapes. So they have a couple different options. There's arrows and kind of these pointed ones, as well as the dotted lines. I thought those were kind of fun. So I just clicked on and kind of drag. You can kind of drag to where you want to go. And something that's kind of fun about Canva is you can kind of see these purple lines that show up. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit so you can see. So you can see these kind of purple lines show up. And this actually kind of, it's snapping to the grid. So it's snapping to the aligned grid. So you're actually able to make sure they're straight lines and not at a weird angle. So you're getting mismatched. So that can be helpful in just aligning to the right placement. I'm not going to leave it here, but this is essentially just a quick demonstration of kind of lining up those grids. I'm going to keep moving through, but if anybody has any questions at any point, just let us know in the chat. Sure, I got all that covered. All right, so the next point here is adding some more texture. So I'm a big fan of digital assets that look handmade. My profession outside of design is sign painting. So I was fortunate enough to learn from somebody who was around before computers and printers were invented, you know, so I love the handmade feel. So especially in movement work, right? It's movement. So you want to kind of bring in some of that movement into the design elements. So for this paint stroke, I also went to Elements, and I think I typed in paint stroke. And under here, there are options with the Pro account if you feel like paying for it, but there's also a lot of free options. So I chose one of the free ones here, resized it to be this size, and then you can see over in this area of the toolbar, we have a color. So if we want to click on here, something that I also really love about Canva is I'm just going to hypothetically pretend that I added a picture to this. And what this will do is it will intuitively pick up on the colors in the picture and make those suggestions as document colors. So it's a really fun way if you maybe are even wanting to kind of zero in on a few colors to actually have the document itself suggest that color scheme to you. And then of course, if you, oh, I'm sorry, that's under photo colors here. So if you were to add an image, the photo colors would be here. And then of course, if you have a custom color, sometimes there's need to have exact colors. You could either enter in the number, the numerical number for a color, or just use this toggle bar here. You can kind of move it at the bottom to choose a different kind of hue. There's a blue, you know, the whole color wheel here. So you can really pinpoint whatever color you're looking for. So we're gonna stick with this red. I wanted to show you how you could do that. All right, so getting into text. This is going to be what I was showing you as kind of the main header. So this is going to be our biggest, our boldest image, or our biggest text. It's our main focus and purpose for this flyer. And I'm going to kind of follow that framework of keeping this in this top area. And you will notice when you type out things, sometimes it will look really big or really long. I want to say the default is pretty spaced out. So I really like to play with the letter spacing. And you're going to find that in this tool here that says spacing. And I will say too, with any of the toolbar things, if you just let the cursor kind of hover over, it will let you know exactly what each tool is used for. So I decided for this, I really want it to be justified. So what that means is all of the text is kind of hugging this right corner here. Perhaps you might have a need for it to be centered or justified left to the left side. For this purpose today, we're going to keep it all the way to the right, justified right. So I'm going to show you here with the spacing. I tend to like the spacing to be a little bit more, not too snug, but just a little bit more formatted, kind of where it fits together a little better. So we could do that with the line spacing here. So we could bring this down to about here and say that I want to match this one. You can go into the spacing. I can see, okay, I had 0.88 spacing. So I'm actually going to just go in and I'm going to change that to be exactly the same. So this way it's the same exact layout as the one above. And similar to this kind of line spacing, the one that I just showed you here, this was more between the lines, where the technical term for the spacing between letters is called kerning. That is essentially the space between each individual letter. In this software, it's called letter spacing. So you can kind of apply, let me see if I can move this a little bit. You can apply that same rule of thumb here to the letters. So instead of kind of vertically, you're giving it a little extra space. And I do like to kind of match up the edges here, just so it kind of fits snug and framed into the space. It still kind of gives it a little bit of breathing room so you can kind of read all of them together. And then a kind of additional fun thing I like to do whenever I'm working with primarily the main headers is sometimes just give it a little bit of extra love. So now we can just add a same exact layer. We're just changing the color here, changing it to black. And this adds what's called essentially dimension. So you're adding a little bit of a dimension to the letters, so it pops out a little bit more. And I actually don't love the black on top of the white. It's a little hard for my eyes to read. So I'm actually going to move the black behind the white. In order to do that, we're going to go back up into the toolbar. And I do believe if you kind of close this section, it will kind of open itself up. Otherwise, it would just be that more button that showed up. But from this space, we can click on position, and then we're just going to hit backward. So now that black has moved just behind the white here. And you can see that's a little bit easier to read than the black on top of the white. So I wanted to show one more thing on here is, just in case, if you know that you have a flyer that's going to have a lot of different information or things on it, it can be helpful to group things, right? So we could have actually grouped really all of these things together as like a base, right? We could group the whole header kind of title sequence here together as another object. And this is just makes it a little bit easier to kind of pinpoint and grab those things if you need to at any point in the process. So I'm going to show you with the letters here. So you really just kind of drag your mouse over all the things that you'd like to select. There's another way to do this as well if you wanted to click on individual items instead of selecting them all. You can click and hold down your shift key and continue to click all the items that you want. So this will, in a sense, grab everything with that shift key, and then you're going to hit your right. I think on the mouse, it's the right clicker. Sometimes it's control click. Essentially, you're going to bring up that right click and then group here. So this is really great now because whenever, oh, it didn't grab that. This is great because it kind of just keeps it all together, right? So if if we want to move one thing, I don't know why it's not working. I'm going to show you on this one instead. So I don't have quite all of them. Looks like I'm missing that one. Huh. Okay, it's not showing up there. Let's try. Group. All right, so it looks like it's having a little bit of a hard time grabbing the black kind of backdrop. So if you were like really kind of wanting to make it easier on yourself, you could kind of group these ones. So now these ones are always together. So now it would be a little bit easier for me to kind of group all of these. But I should say too, if you're trying to move any of them at any point, using that shift key, there we go. So now we can group. Actually, no, we can't. I'm still learning Canva too myself. So there we go. This one's grouped. The rest is not. We're gonna move on. All right, so this is where it gets a little fun. So something that is available for the paid option, I want to say, let me see here, is for photos. I don't know where it is that you could actually cut out images. I'm not sure where the actual option, but not a big deal. So if you wanted to pay for the Canva version to be able to cut out backgrounds or images from backgrounds, you do that. Or you could use this free software. Free is awesome. So we're going to share, it's called photoscissors.com. And we do have a list of different resources. This is one of them as well that we're going to share to the chat. Looks like we did. Thank you. So this is going to be awesome for really any like movement images that you want on your design, to actually cut them out almost like a collage, like onto your design. So completely different program than Canva. So we're gonna first, decide what image we want. For me, I like this photo of Angela, right? Paying homage to Angela and her work with the Alliance. We're going to upload that into the software. And then once we select on the photo, once it's all uploaded, it's going to open up in this kind of interface here. So this is a completely different tool. It's a completely different interface. And I will say this one's a little bit more challenging if you're completely new to graphics to use, but it is pretty intuitive. Something I kind of learned as I was using this is it isn't I guess it's a little counterintuitive. I kept wanting to use my trackpad to like move, but you can see it does this weird zoom thing when you try and do that way. So I found it a little bit easier to use the tools up here to zoom in and out. So we're going to zoom out a little bit so you can see more of the photo, and you can see that there's this like green hue over Angela, and this is essentially highlighting what part of the image that we're selecting. And you can see that it kind of missed a little bit of her hand here. And there, it also selected maybe someone's arm here in the background. So a good kind of rule of thumb, if you're hoping things can kind of go a little quicker with this process, is using images that don't have a lot of background happening. It'll just be a little bit easier to cut out. So you can see, kind of against the sky, it translated really well. But then once you get to kind of the busyness down here, there's a little bit more potential for it to pick up those things. But still, that's not a bad thing. You can work with that as well. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit to where this is happening. And again, instead of using my trackpad to go down to her hand, I'm actually going to go to this move tool and bring that up. Because again, if you use a trackpad, it kind of goes all over the place. So a little bit of a learning curve, but just kind of sticking to the tool set here is kind of your best bet. So we do want to erase this, right? We want to erase this part because this is not what we want. So we're going to go here to the erase markings tool. And we're just going to say, hypothetically, we need to make that bigger. If we needed to, we would move to this tool here, right? So we're going to make it a little bit smaller, somewhere in the middle, and erase this part. And if you look over to the right side of the page, you'll see it totally disappeared, right? I'm going to go back again. Delete that, it's gone. All right, so we want to get the rest of her hand in there though, and it's not selected. So we're actually going to go to this green foreground, the plus button here, and we're going to make it a little smaller. It looks like it might be a little bit too big for her fingers. Make it a tad smaller, and we're just going to select all this different part of her hand. There are knuckles in there. Get a tad bit smaller to get, oh, not that small. Get her thumb. Oh, I hear someone's kitty. All right, so I'm gonna zoom out and you can see, all right, it's looking good. It's looking better. I think I wanna get rid of a little bit of this car though. I don't like it. So I'm going to move back to this tool of erasing, make it a tad bit bigger, and I'm just going to draw a straight line through that just to make it a little bit of a hard edge to line up with our poster. So you see here to your right, this is going to be the final photo. And once you're done and you get it to a place that you like, you got to make sure that it's in this square. Sometimes it'll be kind of like over here for some reason. Make sure that the photo is kind of centered and as snug as you can, because the software is free. So as snug as you can, it'll be better quality. And then once you're done and you got it in a place that you like, then you're just going to go up here to the download button. And then what that's going to do is that's going to download in a low resolution straight to your computer. So once that's done, we're going to go back into our Canva file and we're going to go to the Uploads tab. So here is where we're going to upload our media. So I don't have it on my computer right now, but this is where right after I downloaded it from the photo scissors, you upload it here to the Canva. Very cool. Now we got Angela. All right, so this is something I saw Jasmine Salas. She's a member of our executive committee. I saw that she had this photo treatment on one of our photos. I thought it was really cool. So I wanted to bring that into our design today. So you can see here, sometimes I personally think it makes, if you're having images or cutouts in particular of people, it helps to have some sort of just very subtle border or outline, just gives it a little bit more of like an emphasis, makes it stand out a little bit. You can see from the first to second. So what I did was literally just click the same image again. You can see it here in my library. Oh, and by the way, any images that you upload into Canva will always be in Canva unless you delete them. So you can kind of, keep all of your images in one place. So we kind of clicked it, it brought her back in. And then from this space, I went up to the edit image. So this button will open up a kind of whole new editor here. And there's a lot of different options here. You can kind of work within brightness, contrast. If in some way maybe the light on her face was too dark, you could bring it up. You can see it's applying it to this one here. Let's do this one. So you can actually just click on the photo that you want. You can see it was a little dark. Let's make it a little lighter. Any editing you want to do can be applied here. And then I really liked that color application that Jasmine added. So I went in to see all of this duotone and kind of building off the CAARPR colors of red and green. I wanted to use these colors as kind of a supportive element here. So I chose the myrtle color here to apply to this background, Angela. And then I'm not going to apply any more adjustments to these photos, but if you did want to get into even more photo editing, even just like pulling photography into Canva, you can really get into some more of the nitty-gritty of highlights, shadows, like adding different fades, different vignettes. These all have a different kind of flavor of different processes and elements for photo editing. So I'm going to move her. Now we got her with this cool kind of green color behind her. All right. And I had to add Frank too, of course. Frank is CAARPR's field organizer. So just kind of paying tribute to some of the elders within the organization. I'm not going to do the whole photo process again, but very similarly, uploading a photo. I think maybe Alec took this photo of Frank at a past action. So got photos from Alec, pulled this photo into the photo scissors software and did that same process of kind of utilizing the different tools to select him there and bring it into this document. And for him, you can see I did a little bit more of a red, the deep red, to kind of match the red here in the file. Cool. All right, so from here, we're kind of now working within the negative space, right? So you got some of this negative space. It's a little bit of a triangle now here in this area that we can utilize with some of our secondary information. So we still need the bit.ly as well as the time and date when people can join this live stream. So to do that, we can go back to the elements. And I kind of sticking with the boxes and creating some boundaries for different parts of our design to live. I really like to use boxes. Again, you don't have to do that. It's just personal preference. So I think for that, I went into lines and shapes. Let's see. I really liked this one. So it actually gives you an option to add 2 different colors. And again, you can kind of make it to the right size, right? You don't want it to be too overwhelming. And something that I didn't mention before, that it is kind of a fancy word for spacing, is called margins. So you can see here, the margin between the corner of this box and Frank is now overlapping. The margin between this box and this frame is not is not overlapping. There's a little bit of some breathing space there. I think it's a good rule of thumb to kind of always give things a little bit of breathing space, especially with text. Text, you're going to want a little bit of a margin on the top and the bottom, as well as the sides, just so things aren't feeling too scrunched together. So putting in the box, you want to give a little bit of margin there. And then we want to change the colors, right? Because this purple is not really matching too well. So we're going to change that to green. And then from here, we're going to add the text box. So you can kind of see in the text area of Canva, it has things laid out very similarly to what I described on the hierarchies page. There's headings, there's subheadings, as well as the body text. So all of these are kind of chosen for you, which is not a bad thing. You know, you can really click any one of these, or you can kind of go through this drop down and you can kind of see, like, if you want a bold, I need a bold font. It'll kind of give you options that are bold. So you can kind of look through these. And a good way to do that is just by selecting them. You can see it'll apply. And maybe you don't land on the one that you want right away and you want to try a couple different options. This is a great way to kind of try different texts. And then I also wanted to show, if we go into the styles button here, there's actually different suggested types that go together. So some of these are great if you kind of just need assistance in choosing two types to go together. You can see this one's kind of fun. Oh, this is a color scheme. I think it'll also apply text to. So if you kind of start from scratch and if you kind of need a place to start, you can apply any of these styles if you don't really feel like going through all the different fonts on your own here, kind of show you what are some cool ones that work well together. All right, so on to the next slide. I have kind of the information added in here already. I applied a little bit of the spacing again, you can see, just to make these lines and their edges line up. So again, just by using this letter spacing. And then I actually too, once if this was all in here, I'm gonna actually take it out. I kind of was like, this needs to be broken up a little bit. You can kind of see here, it's a lot of text, right? It's a lot of text that is just stacked on one another, which isn't a bad thing, but I think it can be helpful to the viewer in kind of organizing the different texts and kind of just knowing what parts are grouped by just adding really subtle elements like a line, right? So this really breaks it up. And this is a great way to kind of organize if you have like a date and a time, you could put a line down the middle vertically, or kind of break things up this way by putting one between these two. So very simple and subtle thing that really helps kind of with the organization of the text. I talked about the color. All right. Check my notes. Okay. So at this point, we're getting pretty close. We're getting pretty close to, there's a little bit of room here on the top and the bottom. So it's not necessary, but me, I'm like, I just want to fill it in. I want to make it complete, so this is really a personal preference. In the elements, you can find things like arrows, things like, all sorts of different shapes. I think arrows are really, I love them. I think they're great, especially for, when you have a lot of text on a page, just to kind of guide the viewer's eyes, right? So now it kind of adds this element of like, this is what really draws you in. This is what you're reading, and it kind of guides you to this next part of it. maybe we want to change the color of one of them. So it kind of, is a little bit more cohesive with the overall color scheme. And then lastly, I added just a couple more like rays here to the background. This again is another free element in our graphics. You could see there's all these different kind of like sunbursts. I didn't want to take away too much from all the stuff, the photos and things. So I did, really bring down the transparency. So this is it fully, where this is kind of brought down to be a little bit more, a little bit less kind of, what's the word, opaque. And then, yeah, we're pretty much done. I added a little bit more, one more line this evening. So I was like, it's a big deal. There's people coming from all over the city. So the live stream will feature members and delegates from 20 different cities around the country. And this is very similar to adding that shape, just searching. I believe for this one, I added 2 different shapes. And I just changed the color of the one in the back, similarly to what I did here with the text. So we're pretty much done here. I'm feeling good about this. Once you're ready to go and you're feeling like you're in a good spot, there's a couple different options. So you could physically download, the final version by just hitting download. I have 21 pages, and I could actually, if I wanted to, I could unselect every single one of these except for that last page, page 19 here, and it would download just this page here. Another thing that you can do in this kind of section is you could share it, right? So I want to make this link. I want you guys to be able to use it as a template or to edit it, right? So I could click that and then copy that link. And I'm just going to share it right now to the chat. So now everybody can have a link to this document. And this is great too. Like I want this now to be a template for other people within the media committee to utilize. So we just want to make sure that we're also sharing that with the CAARPR media team and anybody who's a part of that. So now anybody who's a part of the CAARPR media team can now also edit and utilize this template. And then one more kind of thing that I love is adding handwritten elements. So I think, again, it's super fun to bring in, hand lettered posters, really anything you want, whether it's hand drawn art, hand illustrations. I love bringing this stuff into design. The kind of #1 rule you want to remember if you want to try this is that it's on some sort of white paper, because again, with that photo scissor software, it's just not going to register super well if it's something that's really busy, or if it's lined. If it's lined paper, it's going to pick up all those lines, which again, it's not impossible to edit all those out. It's just going to take you a lot more time to work through that process. So something you could even do too is edit the image. You could bring up the brightness, you could bring up the contrast. You can see like, wow, it like really, there's a really big contrast now between the white and the black. And then when you would bring that into the photo scissors software, you could create hand lettered elements, right? So this is just an example of, of doing that, of bringing something that you hand draw into your digital designs. And I think that's it for me. That's all I got. I'm going to open up to the floor for any questions, if anyone has any questions.